So this particular article went with where my research ended up going, that AR actually does improve reading comprehension, which is important. Of course, we wouldn't want a supplemental reading comprehension program that didn't improve reading comprehension, but it also improves their attitudes towards reading, which is so important. I, as a kindergarten teacher and an early education educator, it's easy to motivate my kids. I've noticed with my own personal children, and when I speak with my colleagues, it's not as easy to motivate those 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade students. We have to teach them young to love reading. We have to find what they want to read. We have to get them going on that. I think that's something that we lose sight of with all of our test scores and our gathering of data, and we're in such a data-driven state right now. I think it's very important that we remember it's the students' attitudes. What? Okay. Okay, my cameraman had to tell me something. Okay, methods. The materials that I needed to compile this data for this research study will be in the form of a quantitative information from each participating school, specifically K-Prep data from the past 3 school years. In addition, it must be noted whether or not the school participates in the AR program consistently, and reports must be provided. Of course, I could have collected K-Prep data from all 8 elementary schools and just compiled that data, but if I did not ask the schools if they use the program consistently, then it would not be a good research project, obviously. I have to know if they use it consistently. The way that I collected my data was I collected information from teachers about if they use it consistently. Is it your core reading program, which in Henderson County it is not anyone's core reading program. Is it a way that you supplement reading? Yes, in all 8 it was. Is it a way that you differentiate? Yes, in some it is. And then I gathered the K-Prep scores. And my analysis procedure was pretty simple. I just plugged in each school's data for those 3 years into a spreadsheet. I made myself a simple bar graph, and I could see whose scores was going up. The study will retrieve numerical data to prove higher student achievement based on the use of the Accelerated Reader program in elementary schools. The study will show that schools that consistently participate in the AR program have higher overall achievement on the K-Prep than those that do not participate in the AR program. K-Prep scores will be collected from schools in one Kentucky school district. That's the school district that I work in. When comparing schools in the study, only schools that are similar in size and demographics will be directly compared. That's another important thing. We cannot compare apples to oranges. We have some inner city schools that are very comparable in size, demographics, socioeconomic classes. We have some very rural schools that are very comparable in size, demographics, socioeconomic classes. But to compare the inner city to the rural schools, I don't think that's a good comparison, and I do not think that is successful research. This graph is what I was talking about. It shows my findings. I have listed all 8 of the schools. You can see that the 2012-13 bars are blue. You can see that the 2013-14 bars are orange, and the 2014-15 bars are gray. Now, it is important to note that in 2012-13, it was left up to all schools, principal's discretion. Most of the principals left it up to teacher discretion if you wanted to use AR as a reading supplement. You can see that most of the blue bars are the lowest. Well, they're all the lowest for that particular school. In 2013-14, It was mandated by the district that everyone use AR. There was a little, there might have been some schools that weren't doing it like they were supposed to, but I think most of them were. There might have been some teachers that weren't doing it, but I think most of them were. And you can see that everyone's blue bar to orange bar, whoops, went up. After a solid year of implementing AR as a differentiation program and a supplemental program, you can see that most of them, the orange to gray. Now there was a little dip here at a rural school. There was a little dip here at an inner city school. And we had a dip at another rural school. That one stayed the same. But I think you can see that the overall test scores went up. And nothing else really changed except the implementation of AR. Whoops. The limitations of this study, it was limited to one local school district, and it was narrowed further to only elementary school students in 3rd through 5th grade. I feel like this school district proves to be a good sampling of students from Western Kentucky because we really have a lot of different types of demographics and socioeconomic classes. However, it may not be a good sampling of the state as a whole, not to mention that 3rd through 5th graders that take the K-Prep only represent a small part of students. These students are still mastering literacy skills, specifically comprehension, and are naturally going to show more growth at faster rates than older students. I think that is true. I think it's easy to see large growth in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I think when they're in 9th and 10th grade, you may not see as much growth. Another thing to think about is 3rd grade students are experiencing the K-Prep test for the very first time. We do not test them with K-Prep in K through 2. That's a state of Kentucky thing. Many schools will see a dip in 3rd grade K-Prep scores for this reason alone. The students are not familiar with the test. The conclusion of my action research plan was the data for the finalized action research was collected from the Kentucky Department of Education School Report Card website. It was all public information. The quantitative data collected was then used to answer my research questions. Will the students' K-Prep test scores be higher if AR is implemented consistently, or are there differences in K-Prep scores in rural schools versus urban schools? Many times when looking at data of this type, so many variables exist that it makes it hard to compare data from one school to the next. This research included 8 elementary schools within the same school district. The following are all constants in all 8 schools. Reading instruction is taught primarily from the Journeys curriculum. That is our main curriculum. That is our reading curriculum. And it has been for 3 years. If Accelerated Reader is used, it is a supplement to reading instruction. It's not the core instruction. Each school's student population is 70% or higher free or reduced lunch. That's inner city and rural. It's quite a bit of free or reduced lunch. All elementary schools that were used in this study use AR as a supplement to the reading curriculum and as a differentiation tool. It's important to note that this data was over 3 school years, and the last 2 years of data had consistent use of AR in all schools. The graph shows that all schools have had growth, some very significant since the implementation of AR. It is important to note that the only change in reading instruction was the consistent use of AR by all schools. The research question also addressed inconsistencies in how the program was implemented. All schools within the study consistently implemented AR for the 2013-14 and 14-15 school year. As we spoke about before, in 2012-13, it was left up to the individual schools. Mostly it was at principal discretion. Sometimes it was up to the teachers, though. It just depended on which school you were in. The second and final research question addressed the differences as well as the similarities in school with rural populations versus schools with urban populations. In this district, it is important to note that several schools have a mix of rural and urban populations as detailed below. We have 3 schools that are totally urban, totally inner city. We have 4 schools that are combined urban and rural, and we have 1 school that is completely rural. After analyzing the data from 3 school years, the schools with strictly urban populations do have lower overall schools than the schools with strictly, or the school with strictly rural populations, or schools with both types of populations. However, that is an average. There is an urban school that has had higher schools than all the others. The research could be extended by looking at each student's socioeconomic class within the schools. The research findings show that accelerated reader does improve overall K-Prep scores within a school. It is apparent from the data collected that between the years of 2012 and 2014, K-Prep scores moved up drastically within the district. That shows what just 1 year of consistent implementation as a supplemental reading program could do. And those are my references. And that was the school report card I was telling you about. That's public record. And that concludes my presentation today. Thank you all for being here.